Hey guys, welcome to the definitive ranking of The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Ages.
Yes.
It has been ages since we covered Seasons.
Well, that was one of the first ones we did, right?
The second one.
Oh, okay.
And these ones I think are a bit of a yin and yang, I think, to each other. You've been playing a lot of Ages lately.
Yes. Yep, at the time of the recording, I had wrapped up playing it for Gooey's Dungeon Dive on YouTube. I played it a few years ago too, so I'm pretty familiar with it in more recent times. It wasn't one that I ever owned as a kid.
I had Oracle of Ages on the game. It was the first game I got when I got the Game Boy Advance, which is not even a Game Boy Advance game. It's a Game Boy Color game.
Yeah.
But
it was a late Game Boy.
There were some features in this game that were only accessible on the Game Boy Advance.
Oh,
there was the Advanced Shop. It's literally what it's called. And you get the Advanced Nature Ring and the Advanced Time Ring in Ages and Seasons.
So they were developing it with the advanced in mind too.
Yeah, they were thinking advanced. And I've also been redoing the walkthrough at Zelda Dungeon of Oracle of Ages, and so this is like, I am,
we're immersed, both of us.
Yes, totally. So let's talk about Oracle of Ages. Let's talk about the world. Okay. We both gave it higher marks here.
Yeah. I really like it a lot. I can appreciate your 5 actually. Like I don't really remember. Like I remember putting these down and like kind of wavering between the two and thinking like, oh, it's not as good as some of the other ones, but it's still pretty awesome. Like what I like about this world, I think, is how much more I like exploring it, like the mechanic of exploring the world and how it opens up. Having the time mechanic really works here in telling all these little stories as you advance through the game, because so much of them are about these time paradoxes or like going back in time to get this thing and bringing it to the future, and I think that really fleshes out the world a lot. It has almost sort of the Dark World mechanic from A Link to the Past mixed with the time mechanic from Ocarina of Time, and I think makes it's kind of cooler than both in a lot of ways. Yeah,
the map itself, the actual overworld map of the past and present, it might be my favorite world, actually. My favorite actual layout. But it also has, there are a lot of things, like this is the first time we saw Zoras that are good guy Zoras in 2D.
Oh, yeah.
I love their sprites, and I love...
They do look cool, yeah.
Yeah, Gorons were in Oracle of Seasons, but we also got their character race here as well. And I do like, you were mentioning a lot of the quests with time, I think really help the world. Like there's a Goron who's blocking a staircase, and he's like, we've been protecting... Like basically saying, like, in not these exact words, but we've been protecting this staircase for generations. You go back in time, there's another Goron protecting the staircase. You give him the Goron, you show him the Goron emblem, and he's like, oh, you could pass.
There's all these like fun paradoxes of like, oh, there once was a great hero who came and did this, and then you go back and you do it,
Yeah.
It's like they really made, for almost a lot of the areas, you have a bunch of stuff that's just as fun as like doing the Song of Storms and Ocarina of Time. In terms of like unraveling the world, I think there's a few other games I like more, like Link's Awakening or something like that, in terms of how you progress, but this is done really well. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the art style. I gave it a 4. I didn't really think too much about this 4 because I looked and I gave Oracle of Seasons a 4.
Okay.
So it's like, I don't remember all of the reasons why I gave it a 4, but I'm like, I cannot give these different ones because it's the same art style, more or less.
I think I gave it the same thing, too. I think I did look back on that one and thought, do I like it more or less? But yeah, similar thinking of it. I just love the pixel style that they did for this and Link's Awakening, and how colorful they really made it when it was designed for Game Boy Color. The original art, kind of all the same. We probably said this about...
Almost all of the important characters, the named characters, have character artwork too. So there's a lot of official artwork for this game. Yeah, the 2D art styles, it just fits so well.
Yeah,
it's great.
It's charming. I love it.
Yep. So thumbs up across the board there.
4s, yeah.
Let's talk about the storyline.
Okay. Yeah.
So I give it a 4. I like this story. I think I've made that my position known on this over the years, and
especially when you compare it to Seasons.
I think I gave Seasons a 1.
Wow.
I think because Seasons doesn't have a story. The key characters of Link, Nehru, Varen, Ambi, and Ralph. Like it's got 5 core characters that are present throughout.
It's not like the most deep story necessarily, but it's just a nice little quaint story. And then they do drop some, like, there is some heavy stuff mixed in there that's kind of like, oh, but it's just, it moves nice, and it's a really cute story.
Yeah.
So I love it.
It's actually one of my favorite stories in the Zelda series. I feel like in general, though, it's a lot harder. I don't know if you would agree, but in general, the older games, especially the 2D games, it's harder to relay a story because there's no there's no voice acting, there's no animated cutscenes either. Like it's you're stuck to the 2D world and text, and sometimes it's hard to convey. But I think this did a good job with what they had to work with.
Yeah, it does. It does a good job of trying to give it some of that, like, not cinematic feel, but that slightly elevated feel. But compared to the other approach, I think of like things like A Link to the Past and A Link's Awakening are a bit more mysterious. And that kind of works for it. But this tried, in a lot of ways, with a lot of aspects of this game, it tries to emulate stuff that people came to like from Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, I think.
Right.
And the story, I think they did a pretty good job.
I was not sure what the community and staff were going to say, but they, in general,
favorable, right?
These first like 5-6 categories, you can see, well, you and I we'll get to, like, we gave higher marks for the first several categories, and there was very like strong consistency with the community and staff, all in the mid to upper threes.
It looks like a lot of them,
yeah, including the pacing and progression.
Yeah, kind of touched on it already.
I've actually heard this argument as a negative argument before about Oracle of Ages, about how it has too much of a formula of dungeon, overworld quest to get to next dungeon, and then you do the dungeon, then another overworld quest, dungeon, overworld quest, and I think they're all kind of unique. They're all different. I want to know if do you have any? Do you feel that was like a complaint?
It sort of reminded me in elements of Twilight Princess in some sections, which is strange. But the difference here is that it's micro size, so it's not 3 hours. Sometimes it's like, oh, this is like 10 minutes longer than I think it should be, which is kind of why I went 4. Because I think of a section, I can give an example where, like in Twilight Princess, it's always like, I said this in our video about it, where you do the thing that it feels like should be the thing you got to do, but then there's like another section, and you're like, wait a minute,
okay,
like let's get to the dungeon now. Why am I doing all this? This has that. For example, you do this whole nice little time quest to build a raft
with Shovel and Rafton,
and then you go to that island, but then there's another thing,
right? Then
which I actually like both those things, So that's kind of why I couldn't be too negative on it, because I never thought there was anything that I really didn't like, if that makes sense. Like some of it, I was like, oh, it's a little bit longer than I was expecting, but
I remember when I first played Oracle of Ages, when you get to Crescent Island, let's talk about that for a minute, because that's the one where the characters steal all your items, and you gotta like work to get them.
I love that section.
You can get away. I like all they're just holding the items above their head, and
it's a great puzzle, I think, in general, because you can visualize like what you need, and you know who has it. So you're like, I need, it's a mini version of Wand of Gamelon. If I need this, I need to bring it back here.
Yeah. And they've reused this idea a little bit in like Skyward Sword. I think like the Bokoblin Bigs where they steal your. And there's some optional stuff in there too. There's some mini games you can play, and you can get extra stuff, and you can get your shield back and some upgrades. But I really loved this when I first played it, because it's like a scavenger hunt, and you got to figure it out. It's not short though. It takes... If you've never done this before, it'll take you 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes, if not more, if you get confused. Now, I've played this game like 30 times, and now it's like, on repeat playthrough, I feel like I'm going through the motion, and it's not as exciting. Because it's not combat-oriented. It's not, it's a little tedious if you've played this game a bunch of times. But if you've only played it once or twice, or you've revisited after a long time, then I think this is actually a very good positive.
That was a point, sort of a point we brought up in my video too, was that it's mechanically, the things you do are similar to something I complained about back in our Wind Waker video, where they're like, for example, when you go to Dragon Roost Island, once you get up there, it's just someone tells you, go talk to this person. And then they say, go talk to this person. And you're never figuring anything out.
Yeah.
You're just talking to people. In this, there's a lot of stuff that's like that. But it is, the first time you play it, it is a puzzle.
Yes.
It's not people just saying, go talk to that guy, go talk to that guy. You have to remember, this Goron wants the energy drink, and this Goron wants you to have the medallion or whatever.
Right. And they lay the groundwork where you're walking around the island for the first time, and you see there's this vine, like the vine you're gonna have to grow. I can push it over here, and and then you see like a time portal, like we're clearly you're gonna use this later. You see a crack in the wall. I need bombs for that. Like, you go talk to a toy. He's like, if you plant a tree here, it'll be here. And then like later on, you get a seed scentling. Like,
right, and pretty much all the segments, they do a good job of laying out like the tease.
Yeah.
Near the hint or before it or something like that. So you rarely are like, I don't know where to go.
The only time I actually felt I didn't know, or I get confused, was the segment on Rolling Ridge.
Okay.
With that's with the trading sequence with all the Gorons.
Yeah.
When you're going in caves and coming out of caves, it sort of has that like Adventure of Link Death Mountain feel where like you don't know where you're leading to a little bit.
Yeah.
And especially because there's a past and present and the landscape changes. It's
like,
a
little tricky with like multiple floors and stuff.
Yeah. Like even I've played this game so many times. If you gave me an overworld map and then you say, if you go into this cave, which hole do you come out of? I don't even know if I can answer all those questions because some of the caves have multiple exits, and it's a little confusing actually, and that's a little too lengthy, and it's later in the game. Not a big fan of the Rolling Ridge, and that's probably what prevented me from giving a 4. But also with that though, and we'll talk about this later with the dungeons, is this game, I think there's clearly a beginning, middle, and end of dungeons, and it does, I feel, or the first 2 are like very simplistic. Yeah. And there's longer, more complex ones, and then there's super complex ones.
The pacing of the dungeons, I didn't even consider that, but I would say it's like a 4.7 out of 5. Like how well.
Not a 4.8 though.
Maybe 4.9.
The reviewers tilt.
It does, like, I feel like it's almost to me like each dungeon in terms of difficulty and I think quality it's not perfect, but it almost stacks where each one's like, this is a little bit tougher and it's a little bit more interesting. Let's
jump ahead and talk about the gameplay and the combat, which you gave a perfect 5, and I think you've given 5s to Link's Awakening DX. And
Seasons I did too. It feels so good to me. It feels right. Like for me, and this might just be personal because I played Link's Awakening a lot as a kid, the mechanics feel nicer to me than playing like A Link to the Past, which is considered like kind of the high mark of like the 2D games, which I still think is great. But I don't know what it is. It so clicks with me. Like every time I pick this up, it's so satisfying. Like I think of just the action of sometimes I struggle, but just even like killing an enemy with the sword and shield, and you got to hit him in just the right spot. Like that just all feels really good to me.
Something that's a little annoying to me is your limitations of only holding 2 items.
Yeah.
In very specific cases, it's annoying.
I do agree. There are some bosses that require 2.
In particular, when you're fighting Varen, actually, for the first time, where you have to shoot her with mysterious seeds, with the seed shooter. But then you have to use the switch hook to grab her to remove. But then you don't have anything to attack her with, so you need your sword.
Yeah.
So the boss requires 3 items in a very short period of time. So you're pausing, and you go through this cycle at least 3 times. So it's that kind of stuff is a little tedious.
Yeah, that's similar to how I feel about Link's Awakening, which is like I really like how it feels. There's things that I wish they could tweak about the original, but it's just not going to happen, maybe.
Right. Talking about the items and abilities, I give it a 3, and I looked back, and I believe I gave Oracle of Seasons a 4. I think I actually gave them the same scores, but I think I initially was thinking this is less because it doesn't have Rock's Cape.
Okay.
It's got Rock's Feather, but you don't get that upgrade. And I think I talked ad nauseum about how much I loved using the Pegasus Seeds followed with Rock's Feather a rock cape in Oracle Seasons and just flying across the screen. Like, you don't have that. It's got that, I think this was like the Link's Awakening, where it's like you get an item and then later on you just get the upgrade to the item.
Yeah.
So you get the power bracelet early on, then in Dungeon 1, then Dungeon 8 you get the power glove. You get the switch hook in Dungeon 5 or Dungeon 4, and then you get the long hook in Dungeon 7. You get the flippers in the overworld, then you get the mermaid suit. Like,
yeah, I think for me, I think a similar thing in Seasons. I feel like what stood out to me about the dungeons was they always did a good job of like taking the last item from the previous dungeon, having something fun going on, and then introducing a new fun gameplay thing with a new item. Whereas in this, there's a couple dungeons that do that. I know I'm talking a little bit about dungeons, but what stood out to me more overall was like the puzzles within the dungeon that, you know, it's less about the specific item usage, I guess. I think about ones like the mermaid suit. Like, I just don't really like that one that much. I don't like the swimming mechanics of that.
It changes the swimming mechanics because you need another button. Prior to getting the mermaid suit, you move around the world by just pressing the A button while you're underwater. Once you have the mermaid suit, you're now able to dive deeper underwater. You can only use one item, only the A button, I believe, while you're underwater. But you have the other button because you can resurface in some areas.
The issue I run into is like I'll be swimming, just regular swimming in the water, and then I got to get on the land and react to something quickly, but my brain has to switch from pressing a direction to holding a direction, and it's
a little awkward, and I feel that's probably a notch against it, I think.
That could bump down the gameplay combat a little bit for me, but everything else feels great, so I don't know, I like it.
You talked about the dungeons.
Yes.
And, I mean, you just finished doing Dungeon Dive on these.
Yeah. And I sort of just kind of was sort of negative about an element of certain dungeons. But if I think about a dungeon like Mermaid's Cave, where you have the past and present, what sticks out to me about that one is that cool mechanic of going past to present and not necessarily the specific item usage. So in the dungeons where they don't have that, they have something else going for it. You also mentioned the Power Glove in Ancient Tomb.
Yep.
And that's another one where that actually has a lot of fun item usage, but that specific item isn't necessarily mind-blowing, but the dungeon itself is so awesome that it kind of doesn't matter. Like it actually still serves a pretty fairly decent purpose as like a key, gate, you know, in the dungeon.
Yeah.
And so, the main thing that just sticks out about these dungeons is their cool design, cool themes in a lot of them. And I think Spirit's Grave is pretty simple, but after that, each dungeon has kind of a really fun puzzle idea that sticks out to me.
Some of them are like, you know, brain twisters a little bit. You got to figure out, like, even like Moonlit Grotto, you got this wheel that's like the central focus of it, where every time you step into the wheel, it shifts and you go in a different direction, and the wheel it changes its trajectory.
They had that wheel in Seasons, but it's sort of, it gets a little trickier at the end, but it overall stays pretty simplistic.
It's used, I think, only in one dungeon extensively in Seasons, where it's more of a focal point in multiple dungeons here in Ages.
Moonlit Grotto is a great example.
It makes you wonder, like, okay, I got to get to the room to the right, but if I come in from the bottom, I can only go left, so I got to turn the wheel and then come in from, you know, you got to like...
That one has an element, too, of some things I liked about Majora's Mask dungeons, where there's actually not a lot of things you need to get, and it makes you think of, like, Great Bay, where there's not a lot of non-linearity, but it's about, like, just figuring that puzzle out and making sure you go the right way.
Yeah.
There is some non-linearity, but it's not crazy. But you can still get really twisted up by that.
Yeah.
And that's what I think a mark of a neat idea is, giving you something like that. I mentioned Mermaid's Cave. The past and present, I think, does that gimmick from the Spirit Temple, but actually makes it part of the navigation.
And even further with that is you get the Mermaid's Key and the Old Mermaid's Key.
Yes.
And
you need 2 keys to enter. Yeah.
Yeah, and it doesn't tell you which one you're supposed to go in.
Oh, yeah.
So you could, like, I know that you go in for the past, you got to change the world around, which affects what the dungeon looks like in the present, because you move a wall and you bomb a wall, and then you come back in the present and those walls are exposed.
Right.
But you could start the dungeon in the present.
Yeah.
And do some stuff.
That's another one where it's actually kind of simple. Like, you just have to go, like, You only have to go past.
There's not that many rooms in
past?
that dungeon.
No.
Past, present, past is the correct path.
Yeah,
but you could go present, past, present, past. You can go 5
get pretty
times
twisted
over.
up in that. Yeah.
Yeah, they both have a dungeon map and both have a compass.
It's another example of they did a lot of themes that were reminiscent of like Ocarina of Time and kind of made them fit in this 2D setting, and I think they did a great job.
Probably none more so than the 7th dungeon, Jabu Jabu's Belly.
Yeah.
Which it takes the name of a dungeon from Ocarina of Time.
And the theme, it takes that theme.
You're inside of which I love going to Jabu Jabu in the past. Because he's like an insy bitsy
little
kitty.
fish, yeah.
Yeah, and then you go in the present and he's a giant whale.
Yeah, it's cute.
But the dungeon is a 2D version of Ocarina of Time's Water Temple.
Yeah.
In many ways. Because there's 3 spots to change water level, but there's also the gimmick of you need to get 4 keys that are scattered about the dungeon, and you can get them in any order kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you can reach a point like, I don't have this key. Where's this key?
What I've liked about, because I've been going chronological in my series, so we've had to look at all these different water dungeons that take inspiration from the same idea. But up to this point, they're all different. They're all like in terms of how you progress. So you can't just say that this is just a copy of the water temple.
Right.
Because the way you progress through it is so much different. There are a lot of similarities, but it's also very unique on its own. Mm-hmm. One is just trickier in 2D, you know.
Well, it's also the dungeon item to make the comparison is Ocarina of Time you get the hook shot, you got the long shot. Here we had the switch hook, and we got the long hook.
There is an element of that too, where it's like you get that, and then you got to remember, like you've seen the spots you got to go back to.
Right. Overall, these are. I think I gave 5s to Twilight Princess for dungeon. I think that was the only other one, and I think this might have my favorite dungeons in the series as well.
I think we did a thing where
maybe Ocarina I gave it 5. I don't know.
We've been doing at the end we have some stats where we calculate the average dungeon ranking, like the average ranking on the list, and then we also do one where we assign points from top to bottom to look at different, it's kind of arbitrary, but different metrics of how we would rank them, and I think this is like one of the highest for me in both categories.
Okay.
I think I can't say it's definitively the best, but it's one that I think is up there.
Well, it's not just our opinion either, because the 3.9s across the board, spoilers, but those are the highest rankings for the community.
Okay.
Any of the other
And
categories.
that's good for...
I think this is like the first game ever in this list that the music is not the highest one.
Wow. Well, that doesn't surprise me, I guess.
No.
But
so the community and staff, it's not just us. Everybody loves the dungeons here. But what we all don't love are the enemies and bosses.
Well, what don't you like that much? Because if you would have asked me before replaying it just now, I probably would have said 2.
Okay.
And then playing it again, I was like, even some things that I have been like, I didn't like that before, and I could see why people wouldn't still. For some reason, this time around, I enjoyed them just a little bit more.
I like the overworld enemies. Like I said this about Oracle Seasons, it's like a lot of the old enemies from the original Legend of Zelda and some from A Link to the Past that have been reimagined in a few more pixels. And I love the Lionels. They're cute. And there's just a lot of good enemies. It is a bit of a setback with the bosses. I feel there's a lot of them that are just misses a little bit. I don't like the one that stands out to me is the Thwomp. The second one from the Wing
That's a good
Dungeon.
example of one where this time around playing it, maybe I just had good luck, but I was like, oh, this is kind of fun.
They're definitely unique. I will give them that, because that and Smog is another one.
That's the other one where I was like,
I'm okay with Smog. Actually,
I think about that one and it's like, oh, it's a pain in the butt, but something clicked this time where it's like, I did not struggle, and I was like, this is actually pretty fun.
Okay.
But I think I would, if we were comparing that to Season, I probably went higher, because those just have really fun, like, the combat-oriented bosses. Whereas this, they sometimes, again, they try to take concepts, like puzzle boss concepts from Ocarina of Time and incorporate it here. And I think it does, it's sometimes hit or miss, for sure.
Then there's some of the other bosses, like the boss of Moonlit Grotto is like, you fight it by ricocheting stuff off the wall. Like, and I feel, maybe not so much that one, but some of the other bosses, like, it feels like you're doing the same thing. There's the boss of, is it Crown Dungeon, I believe, or not Crown, of Skull Dungeon, where it's like a Patra. You do a switch hook with it, and you hit it. It's
kind of one mechanic, yeah.
Then you get to the boss of Jabu Jabu's Belly, and it's like it shoots fireball or whatever balls, and you just switch spots with it and it causes it to hit himself.
Okay, it's a little different though, because the Patra ones you just want to pull it out and hit, and I did like, and I think that's fun on its own. It's a simple, but still like takes some skill. And the other one's different because you want to line up the shot.
Yeah,
it's similar, but I still even feel like that one's fun.
The Shadow Hag one, where you have to, it like chases you, so
you
then
have to bounce it off
you
the wall.
shoot off the wall and it ricochets back. That exact same mechanic you use in Mermaid's Cave when you go underwater.
Okay.
Or at least that's a mechanic I use. I think there might be alternative strategies, actually. Yeah, it's chasing you. You run away from it, and you just shoot the wall over and over and over and over.
I don't remember what I did now.
Actually, there are other ways. Varen is, I think, okay, but it is probably maybe...
I like Varen a lot.
Maybe one of the easiest final bosses in the Zelda
Really?
series.
I thought it was tricky.
Really? Okay.
It wasn't the hardest thing. The hardest thing, which is not really factored in, but for me was fighting Ganon. But I did a Link game.
Yes, Ganon and Twinrova too. But Ganon is tough.
Let's just say it's a whole big.
Ganon is unless you have like.
I had a potion, and I think like the
potions won't do it. You need. Did you have the Master Sword?
I had the level 2, I think.
Okay, the Master.
I fought him for like an hour.
Okay,
no joke.
You need. Did you have the blue ring or the red ring?
I don't think so.
Or the.
But I beat him. I beat him though, so I don't need that stuff.
Yeah. I feel like if you go into Ganon with just the level 2 sword, if you go into him with the level 1 sword, forget it.
Yeah, no.
It is. Well, one, you're not going to get to Ganon because you got to be Twinrova with the level 1 sword, which is one of the most difficult things in the entire Zelda series.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
If you want a challenge, if you think you've done it all in Zelda, do a linked game.
Let's just beat it. Oh, okay, yeah.
Don't use a ring. No rings. Level 1 sword and try to fight Twinrova.
One thing I want to say, bosses, because I want to shout it out because I think it's the best boss in the game. His name Ramrock. Loved that boss.
It's got like 5 phases.
5 phases. They're all very action packed, but they have like a puzzle twist to all of them. But each phase requires skill. I would say
you use the siege shooter for one to hit him in his backside.
Yeah.
You throw bombs so he explodes them.
Yes.
Use the power bracelet to pull back the bowling balls.
Fling it at him.
Is there a sword portion?
There's 4 at least.
Don't you ricochet his stuff back with a sword?
His bongo hands. Because he is he's a bongo.
Yeah.
If I had to describe it.
Yeah, that's his race. Should we update that on the Zelda Dungeon Wiki? Race.
Bongos. Because he's the first, right?
Yeah, there's at least 4 bongos that we know of.
That boss to me is a 5.
All right, let's talk about the side content and extras. Some lower remarks from both the staff and the community. The lowest was from the community. I think on my Oracle of Seasons, I think I went on a rant about the ring system. There's various Goshinuts all over the world, and there's like a hidden tier system, basically. I believe there's only 2 locations in the world where you can actually get.
You sound like you're describing a conspiracy theory right now. Yeah, I don't think we need to rehash it.
Rings are bad.
You don't like it. I've always been kind of like wishy-washy on certain games with the side content because it's more of just like, what do I really engage with? And yeah, it's just, this is not just one where I really do it. I mean, I would say the trading sequence is we did our trading sequence video. I think this is a really good one.
Yeah, and that was the only thing I think I gave this a bump over the over Oracle Seasons because one, I like the characters and the storylines involved with the trading sequence a little bit more. Also, you actually have to do it. Like in Oracle of Seasons, if you just know the direction, you can guess and get through. And there's a lot more mini games in this game. Not all of them are the best. I like the kart game on the Rolling Ridge.
Some of these aren't side content because you have to do them.
You some of them you have to do, and then you can go back and replay them and get the boomerang or something.
Like I don't do those, so sort of like whatever to me.
In fact, I think every mini game in this game is required.
Okay.
Because there's the baseball shooting gallery. There's 2 versions of that. There's the Toki Tasty Meat game where you throw the meat.
Yeah. That one's fun.
There's the bomb game where you have to avoid the bombs.
Yeah, there's the restoration ceremony.
Yeah. Then there's the Goron Dance Hall, which we don't talk about.
I like doing the dances.
Oh. Okay, let's talk about the music and sound. You gave it a 3.
I know. I was so surprised. I knew this was going to surprise people, but maybe it has a little bit to do with like, because I'm making music selections for my videos and everything, but I found there was enough charming tunes in the game, and I generally like that kind of sound, the chiptune sound too. And yeah, there's just like a lot of really nice themes in the game. It's not the best, obviously, and I didn't go 1 because it didn't have that magnetic gloves sound that I hated.
It does have Crown Dungeon is probably one of my least favorite themes.
Crown Dungeon. Okay, that's not one I remember as well.
It's a very short song and it's on a loop.
There's a lot of forgettable songs. There's nothing that's truly awful, I don't think. A lot of the dungeon ones don't stick out to me as much. I do like the Skull Dungeon theme. It sounds kind of Castlevania-y, actually.
Yes.
But I will say, like, there were some that just kind of really charmed me, like the Zora's Village one.
I like that.
It's so pleasant, cute almost.
I like Ambi's theme too, the Ambi's Palace.
Yeah,
that plays somewhere else later in the game as well. But yeah.
Yes.
And I like Line of City and Line of Village. And I like how they're slightly different takes on the same song.
Same to the overworld themes, kind of having one's more like booming and triumphant a little bit.
And I like that it's like a kind of a remix of
the Zelda theme, right?
It's different than the Link's Awakening.
It does sound similar to Link's Awakening, though, right?
Is it the same as Link's Awakenings, or is it slightly different? I don't even remember.
I don't know.
I can't even picture it in my head. But there are some good songs. But this is one of those ones where, as you see from the community polls, almost every Zelda game gets higher marks for the music, because music is one of the standouts in the Zelda. A lot of people associate music with the series. It
always provides.
And I think Oracle of Ages, comparatively, compared to most of the series, is at the lower end of the spectrum.
Yeah. But I would still say, for me, good.
All right, so...
this is actually one where all our scores of the final score are pretty close. Obviously, we have different interpretations of what that score means.
Yeah.
Like you see it on our, like you and I lists, for example. But it is kind of cool to see that 3.6, 3.5, 3.5, 3.7.
I actually have a 3.6. I think I printed this and I adjusted it.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll change it.
We'll fix it in post.
Yeah. Let's see what our... By the way, this is like the little printout I make. And I had to make... this shows the rankings. I had to make the font smaller because it was...
I had to do that recently with the image for our videos, and it was a pain in the butt.
There are a lot of games on this list. It was nice to see... Even though we did this is now, I think we did, this is January 2022. We did Oracle of Seasons in February of 2020.
Oh.
So it's been 2 years.
Okay.
And despite that, Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages both came in at 3.6 by the community.
Wow.
I had to look at the decimals to see which one.
As much as we want them to be separate.
They are forever attached, and... So nice to see that. It ended up tying with Minish Cap and decimal points a little bit lower from the staff, but right in the middle of the bunch. I think dead set in the middle.
I thought it would be higher for you, but I think you were like fairly critical of it.
I feel like the machine. So
yeah, this is not what you would say.
It came up tied with Link's Awakening 2019. I'm like, okay, I'd rather play Oracle of Ages, so I put it above that. But it came under Link's Awakening. And this is like a lot of it is because of, I mean, if you look at my rankings, they're all solid other than, like, I couldn't bring the music or sound higher than 1. And
is that like less of a factor for you? You feel?
Yeah, I don't think it's important for this game. The music for I mean, it's a Game Boy game. Like, I don't think of it, but
you almost wish you could give some of the ones you gave higher scores, like a stronger weighting or something.
Yeah, in a way. And furthermore, like, I don't think I could have justified giving a higher score for the bosses, because from what I talked about, I think other Zelda games is doing better.
Yeah.
But I think the things I love about this game are so strong that, because of the system, there's a 2 and there's a 1 in there. If those were both 3s. My score would, instead of being a 3.6, it would be a 3.9 or a 4.0. And because I truly feel I like this game more than Link's Awakening DX. I think it's a better game, and I think it's better than A Link Between Worlds. I probably would have put it at 3rd on my list, but the system prevented me from doing that. And the system doesn't lie.
No,
the system can't
of course
lie.
not.
It's bulletproof.
I mean, yeah, that's what I'm looking at mine. It's like I would probably put it above cadence. If you asked me, I probably would have said it's a better game than A Link Between Worlds, but I'm overall happy with it because I think you kind of see if you look at like in the bigger picture of my list, you kind of see the era that I prefer, I guess.
Okay.
I love the run from the first Legend of Zelda. I mean, I have Adventure of Link a little bit lower, but the classic games are kind of the ones I like. So that to ages, that's a solid run of games, and then those GameCube ones are lower.
The GameCube Zeldas?
The GameCube/Wii Zeldas.
Which I don't think we have any more of those to cover.
No
GameCube Zeldas. I think we still have a Wii Zelda, sort of. No, that's a Wii U Zelda.
That Wii U Zelda.
But we're covering none of those next month, because next month, I would like to say, I think I mentioned this we've got, between you, me, the staff, and the community, we have 4 different games that are number 1, which I like seeing.
Yes.
I have a strong feeling, a very, very strong feeling, that after our February game, none of those 4 will change.
Yeah. Wait, what do you think about the bottom? Do you think that'll change?
Ooh, possibly. Don't think so, but maybe. Because for the month of February, we are covering the Legend... Does it have Legend of Zelda in the title? I think it does.
I don't know. It should.
The Legend of Zelda Triforce Heroes. Mm-hmm. So this is another one that the poll... You guys can vote on it. It's in the description below. It's up for interpretation on what you consider a dungeon, what you consider side quests, what you consider, what you think is actually music. Music is what the world is.
Yeah.
Use your judgment, just as you did with Four Swords Adventures and the Wand of Gamelon, and
Yeah.
The categories may not fit perfectly for Triforce Heroes, but we're going to cover it next month. It's been a while. I have not played it all the way through since 2015.
I've barely played it, so I'm hoping we can get some good multiplayer time in.
This is a true revisit for me. It's been 6 years since I've played this. This is the longest gap for sure. Well, and we've played all the games at this point in this series, so I haven't played this in a long time all the way through, so I'm excited to jump into it. I'm really anxious to see what this ends up being. Maybe it'll be a surprise.
Me too. When I think about those other multiplayer ones, I want to see where it lands.
I'm planning on playing some of this multiplayer and some of it single player.
Yeah. So this won't be a traditional one, but I want to see all elements of it for sure.
So well, join us for the month of February, where we're going to play some Triforce Heroes.